Hi, hello, friends, lovers, and people who have never heard of the Megillah before. No, it has nothing to do with the gorilla. Truth is, I watch a lot of Smoky Glow videos, and every time Hannah does something even slightly wrong, like when she mispronounces documentary, I run to my little YouTube Tings group chat and tell them that I'm going to challenge Hannah to a fight to the death because I love to hyperbolize and I love to be mad. And it's much easier to be mad at dumb things like this than it is to be mad about Twitter not banning Trump when 11 innocent people were murdered in his name, and instead waiting till a bunch of Congress people got to experience what so many marginalized people experience on a daily basis. Anyways, this is not a Hannah thing, but some of the things that she said in her video, like, low-key got my goat. Like, I'd honestly say a lot of people don't know about Esther and the story of Purim. I mean, especially not Christians. I know that it is in the Christian Bible, but I simply must reject that, or I cannot continue to be existing. But even like people who like weren't really raised that religious, like who are Jewish, probably because in the US Purim has been downplayed as like an unimportant holiday. TBH, the holiness ranking goes Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Passover, and who cares about the rest, even though that means that we only have one drinking holiday on the important list, when there are at least 3 other amazing drinking holidays that are important. TBH. Purim, as you may have guessed, is a drinking holiday. Hannah talked about how people had been mocking Amanda Ensing for basically like saying that she is the second coming of Esther and we should absolutely be mocking her for this. But I actually want to talk about how this is anti-Semitic. I want to bring this into a much more like macro conversation that's not about Amanda and is instead really about like macro conversation, because despite Christians taking the story into what they call the Old Testament, it's offensive and anti-Semitic for Christians to liken themselves to Jewish people who have protected the Jewish people from our oppressors. And this really just like is a great way to open the door to that conversation. So I'm not going to be talking about Amanda's blackfishing, as you probably already guessed, considering I'm talking about Purim. If you want to hear from women of color on the issue, you can go and watch Sharita's video, you can go and watch Liv Said So's video, or low-key my personal favorite, Mava's video, which if she's single, you are my type. She's my type on paper. I will simply not be calling Amanda Ensing Esther because I am alive, alert, awake, and aware, and I don't stand for any of this idiocracy. I'm also going to really try my best not to be mean about Christians, but if I am, you guys really did start it with the 2,000 plus years of persecution. Before we even talk about what Purim actually is, we need to talk about how obsessed I was with Esther as a child. We can point directly to this one book of the story of Purim that was in my Hebrew school library that I stared at every time we had library class, and I think I checked it out pretty much every single week for the entirety of every school year. I was so unbelievably attracted to Esther at the ripe old age of 7 that I simply cannot put it into words. I just really am that gay. I also had a hairbrush that had like a ceramic picture on the back of it that looked very much like this Esther from this book, and I was obsessed with it. And then I'm pretty sure I broke it, so I wish I could find it, but I have no idea where it is, or if anyone even makes it, or if there was ever any photos ever taken of it. As I explain the holiday, you'll understand why it's so fucked up for Amanda to be claiming to be like Esther. And then you'll obviously see why my gears were ground that I didn't see anyone calling her out for it, but also I have to remind myself, only 2% of the United States is Jewish, if even that much. So why would anyone know other than me? Why would honestly anyone who's not paid to be Jewish and teach Jewish things to other Jews, why would I expect anyone else? It's gotta be me. The onus is on me. I have the moral obligation to be smart and correct. So the story of Purim is in the Megillah, which is this little scroll that they yeeted out of the original Torah. I really could not tell you why. I just know that that's how it is. It tells the story of how Persian King Ahasuerus, I will simply be mispronouncing his name. I want the record to show that I'm literally pulling up a blog right now that is titled How to Pronounce Ahasuerus Without Embarrassing Yourself. I am sick of the buffoonery that is having 9 ways to pronounce the same thing in 8 different languages in anything Jewish. I want it to all be one language and it to be English. Please. I'm being told it's Ahasuerus and Ahasuerus, and I thought it was my whole life. Ahasuerus? I don't think I know what I'm... I think maybe it's time for me to take a pay cut simply because I don't know how to pronounce his name. But I will be saying Ahasuerus, but probably not with the correct R sound. Sorry to anyone who speaks Hebrew, but I hate that language. I don't like it at all. Is that because it was a revived, constructed language? And I was once a linguistics major? Yes, it is a little bit. Anyways, the Megillah tells the story of how King Ahasuerus was a stinky little misogynist and had his first wife killed because she just wasn't at his beck and call. He had a beauty contest to find his next wife. Sort of, if we wanted to place this historically, he was almost definitely the king of the, I'm gonna be reading off my script, a Achaemenid Empire. It might also be Achaemenid. I don't know anymore. Which I literally never even heard of because the US education system is trash and we don't learn about any other countries that aren't our own. But this empire was possibly maybe what was spanning from Libya all the way up through Turkey and all the way west, basically to Pakistan, that's a big territory. But at the time, they called this empire Persia, which is probably why it's written down that way in the Megillah. If you want to be even more specific, the story says it took place at Susan. When you think about but the capital was Babylon, so I don't know. If I'm smart enough to put a map, then you'll know where it is. Otherwise, who knows? But this kind of makes sense because the Persian Empire would have taken over the Babylonian Empire where Jews had been held hostage there for a while, and a lot of Jews didn't really move back until closer to Jesus being alive because then the Second Temple was built, blah blah blah. There's a whole lot of history going on that is not really that important. It was just very interesting. Mordecai already knew that there was some trouble brewing with King Ahasuerus because he hated the king's senior advisor, Haman, who was an anti-Semite. And so Mordecai convinced Esther to go and be part of this beauty contest. It probably wasn't actually a beauty contest, but that's how it was always explained to me. And also, Esther might have been his wife, but even the rabbis of the Talmud were like, we don't know. So we're just going to go with the story that she's his niece and he's not married to her, because that just makes it way simpler. So he tells her to go to this contest because 1, she was hot as hell, and 2, he thought that she could hopefully save the Jews if the king realized that a Jewish person was important to him or whatever, so then we wouldn't die if Haman goes ahead with his dastardly plan to kill us all. This was kind of a big deal because 1, this king was already temperamental, and deceiving him was obviously going to be a risk of her life. And it was super, super frowned upon to not intermarry. I really thought it was in the halakha that you could not marry a non-Jewish person, but no, I was simply wrong. Basically, people didn't start becoming cool with intermarriage until the early 1900s. So the king obviously used his eyes and chose Esther because otherwise we wouldn't have a story. Mordecai, who, him and Haman were enemies, unfortunately never ended up being also friends to lovers, but I'll survive. But Mordecai finds out that Haman sneakily convinced the king to sign off on this decree saying that Haman could go and kill all of the Jews.
Some people are bad.
So then Mordecai goes to Esther and tells her, and is like, you have to fucking talk to the king, even though it was illegal for her to go and directly talk to the king unless she was summoned. So she, she says, okay, I'll do whatever it takes. And she goes to the king and she tells him about the dastardly plan and reveals that she's a Jew and is like, if Haman does this, then I'll die.
Yeah, people are gonna die.
And he says, you know what, instead of killing you and being mad at you, I will actually simply keep my hot-ass wife and have Haman killed and let Mordecai be paraded through the streets like a hero, because he is. So back to Amanda Ensing, we see why this is problematic. She can't say that she's like Esther, because this is a story about a Jewish woman risking her life to save the Jewish people from genocide. Amanda kind of first really talked about this in this Instagram story that she made, where she says she literally never even read the Book of Esther, which, first of all, fake fan. Also, I will be simply putting my foot down. It is hereby no longer allowed to be referred to as the Book of Esther. It is the Megillah. But Amanda's friend went to her and was like, I think we're living in the time of Esther. So then Amanda on her Instagram story is like, she's Christian-splaining the Megillah and is like, Esther was this beautiful woman who stood up to the king and saved her people.
And she was reminding me of the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther, if you don't know it, look it up after all of this and watch the video I'm going to post because it's insane. But the Book of Esther is something that has never been brought up in my life. No one has pointed me to it. I've heard about it before, like brought it up to me like years and years ago, but it's not something that's ever been like spoken over me and something that I was about to do. And I thought it was very unique. Like it stood up in my head because Esther was this beautiful, like one of the most beautiful women, and she stood up to the king and she saved her people. So it's about to get wild. So a thought popped in my head whenever she was breathing this life into me, and I was like, what if God brought me on this platform for a moment in time such as this? You know, when you read people in the Bible, all they had was their faith in God. They didn't know God was going to come through. They believed God was going to come through. And we read the aftermath in the Bible. So I was like, okay, what if I was brought here for this moment? Like, God got me here. I'm going to risk it all for God, right? Okay, so I held on to Esther. I uploaded my video on Monday morning. As soon as I post the video live, there were like a few comments that had come in. And the first one that I looked at was from the Book of Esther. And I was like, okay, this is too weird. And that stood out to me alone. And I was like, no one's ever commented about Esther before in any of my YouTube stuff in almost years. Like, this is weird. It gets weirder. About 30 minutes ago, I go into my DMs, and the first message that I see is from a follower who watched my new video, and she goes, Amanda, I love your new video. And she was like, we are living in the days of, you guessed it, Esther. And I was like, what? But this is just God speak. Like, I can't deny it. I also want to share this verse with you. It's in Esther 4:14, and I'll have it on the screen, but essentially it says that if you remain silent at this time, the Jews will be saved from another place, but your family will perish. And it says that what if you were brought to this royal position, this high power, time such as this? That was God speaking to Esther, that if she remained quiet, her and her family would be perished and the Jews would still be saved. But that he brought her to this place, this high position of power, for this one moment in history. God did not call us to be silent. He called us to use our voice. God called us to be spiritual warriors. And there are a lot of Christians that are being really quiet and sitting back and not wanting to get into conflict, not wanting to cause any division. The division is already here. We should be using our voice for love and for truth. We got to speak up.
This isn't prophecy, so I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. This is the thing that happened, or at least we're supposed to believe that it's a thing that happened, but it's not prophecy. Prophecy is pretty explicitly prophecy. One, God never spoke through Esther. Also, the Book of Esther is one of the 2 books in the Torah that don't mention God, which is extremely sexy, and I do love that about this beautiful woman. She really gave me the most. 2, Esther wasn't a prophet. 3, I don't know, prophets aren't important. The fuck? Literally the only prophet that I can name is Elijah, because he has to come into our house every Passover and drink all of our wine. What a rude bastard. So if you've been hearing what I've been saying, you're probably also seeing the problems with this, since I just explained the whole Megillah. And I am fully convinced that Amanda is literally only likening herself to Esther because she gets off on saying that she's beautiful, and really just like needs to boost her ego or she dies. She also says all the people in the Bible had was their faith in God. That's not true. That's literally not true. Also, that's not the message of this story. Also, the Jewish people are basically just told, like, you just can't believe in multiple gods. I mean, believing in God was never really, like, the main thing. The moral of the story of Purim is actually that you have a moral obligation to break certain laws under various circumstances, which I will get to in a moment. Amanda also says that there's a spiritual war going on right now, where? I'm not seeing it. And that's sort of where she says that the Megillah is being played out in real life, but in Christian terms. As much as it bothers me, I'm not actually going to totally disagree with, because I feel like it would be a little bit of a stretch for me to say that violence against the Jewish people isn't being condoned by our government. But the Megillah is not about a spiritual war. And she was saying this like she's trying to save someone from persecution, but girl, Esther put her life on the line to keep others from dying. I have not seen you risk yourself at all. Literally at all. Your life was simply never in danger. In Judaism, our number one defining principle, who's awake? It's Remy. In Judaism, one of our most, if not the most, defining principle is called pikuach nefesh. That was supposed to be quotes, but now it just looks like I'm giving the peace sign, which is the belief that there is nothing more important than protecting or saving life. This also extends into maintaining someone's health. This principle is so important that you can break any Jewish law in the name of pikuach nefesh. So, for example, on Yom Kippur, we are commanded to fast. This is like the last day that the Book of Life is allegedly open and the amorphous divine is somehow writing our names down to be alive for the next year. It's very much Santa Claus is checking his list twice energy to me. And I mean, I have and will and probably will continue to go on multiple tirades about Yom Kippur, but this is not the time. But Yom Kippur, as I previously mentioned, is the holiest of holidays. You are commanded to fast. However, if it poses a risk to your health, you are actually commanded more fervently not to fast because of pikuach nefesh. I really and truly tried to do some digging, and there is no such principle in Christianity. There is no foundational belief that is so important that it requires you to break other laws to maintain that is the thing that's being upheld. Partially, this is because Christians don't observe halakha or laws, I guess. There really isn't a legal system in Christianity. And I'm not going to actually explain that this is a literal legal system, but it was. And under the Ottoman Empire, which is the best example that I have, Jews were allowed to literally just run their own courts because there was three legal systems. There was the secular legal system, the Muslim legal system, and the Jewish legal system. There is no Christian legal system, and there is no one Good Morning Bowlby across the board defining important principle in Christianity other than the requirement to believe in God, which believing in God and ensuring that no one dies are very different. I hope that's not offensive, but they are so unbelievably different to me. Amanda Ensing has not protected anyone from genocide or broken any laws. She also hasn't really deceived anyone other than the blackfishing. She did not endanger her life to protect others as much as she may believe that she did in her curdled fantasy. And even in that fantasy, she's probably putting herself in as much danger as she would be if she was to jaywalk in a mid-sized United States town. Probably about the smallest risk I can imagine. Also, In Judaism, it's probably like our second or third most firmly held belief that you are not supposed to evangelize or try to get other people to convert to Judaism. You're not supposed to go out and be like, you are going to hell if you don't believe in Judaism. One, false equivalency, we don't have hell. Two, like, that's the thing that we're not supposed to do. Just further proof that Amanda likening herself to Queen Esther is just idiotic bullshit. The brain cells are simply not working and she has no idea what she is talking about. My message to you, the important thing that you must take away from what I am saying is don't compare yourself to someone who prevented a genocide unless you are preventing people from genocide. Also, it is disgusting and offensive if you do that and you aren't part of the group who the genocide was almost committed against. Truly just not rocket science. It is so easy to understand, very simple. And I know, like, we shouldn't be giving Amanda free clout, but she's not Trisha Paytas. Even if she is trolling, she's making an attempt, but she is nothing of the sort.
And she's nothing like that. She's nothing of the sort.
Anyways, there goes Remy again. It is time for second ear cleaning of the day. It is the most important thing that happens in this household. Anyways, you can let me know if I'm wrong about Christianity, but it truly just looks like they took the entire legal system and customs and Mishnah and what the rabbis have written, and they said, actually, no, fuck the rabbis, fuck the oral Torah, and fuck the Gemara, and threw the baby out with the bathwater. And where I usually would be like, well, here's what we can do now. Like, there really isn't anything with Amanda. There really isn't anything for us to do. Just, like, don't appropriate heroic figures who saved people from genocide, if that doesn't pertain to you. And, I mean, I would also love to see you call out your Christian friends for doing this kind of bullshit. Amanda is not the only one on the internet who has done this kind of nonsense. It is ridiculous, and we should be calling people out for it. So, thank you so much for being here. I feel like I had something important to say, but I also don't think I did.
O'Reilly.
Feel free to like this video or subscribe if you feel so inclined. I would very much love that. Join me. As always, you can find my social media linked below. I would love for you to follow me there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Whoa, whoa, Mamma Mia, here I go again.